It's time to talk Gonzaga basketball.
Get ready.
Insiders Jim Meehan and Richard Fox bring you the latest games and standings for the Gonzaga Bulldogs on Gonzaga Basketball Insiders.
Good Monday, everybody, and welcome back to the Zags Insiders podcast. I'm joined by Richard Fox, the former Zags center and TV analyst for GU games on KHQ, SWX, and Root Sports. I'm Jim Meehan. I've covered the Zags for the last 15 years. Before we get going, we do want to mention we're missing our engineer, show producer extraordinaire, Jesse Tinsley, had a medical issue. We are sending all good thoughts, our prayers your way, Jess, and hope to see you soon. But we are grateful for Christy Burns, who is, she's got the toughest job of the day. She's trying to make sure me and Richard stay on task here technologically. So that's not an easy job, is it, Richard?
No, it's not. It really should be a full-time position, I would think.
Well, I'll suggest that to the powers that be. We need to move on. We've got a lot to talk about. The season's past the midpoint, but we're just in show number 2 for this podcast. You can find us Monday afternoons generally is when it's posted on Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, as well as the Spokesman-Review. Our website is spokesman.com. Click on the Zags page and you can find the podcast there, as well as all of our Zag coverage all in one spot. Pictures, stories, columns, the whole works. It's all there. So onward, Foxy, to the week that was, and then we'll take a look at the big week coming up. Zags just had one game. They played Portland in Portland. It was kind of a nice 7-day break that they had. You kind of hit that reset button, you mend the bodies, you take a break mentally, then you get after it in the gym. Before we get into the pilots and the Julian Strother show that he put on, I know you probably had a break or two during the season. Sometimes it's that holiday break. Sometimes it's just a 1-game week in the conference. And it's kind of the reset button to the finishing stretch here for the Zags. And I know they dialed into the defense a part of it. What does that week do for a player who's just been on that grind 2 or 3 games a week? And then you kind of get a little bit of a respite from that. What do you remember from when you played?
I think it's enormously beneficial. Regardless of the kind of team you have and the kind of season you have. I mean, even if you think back the last few years where the Gonzaga's kind of run through the league, there's a grind to that. And just to have the ability to step away. And I think for this year's group, considering how competitive these games have been the last 5 or 6 weeks, just the ability, I think more than anything, just to get away from it for a day or two. It may not sound like a long time, but 24, 48 hours, or maybe you're not around each other, around the staff, if you don't have a ball in your hands, and can kind of recharge. And then I do think from just a physical perspective, I think of a guy like Drew in particular, he's got to carry so much of the load. I would imagine be able to put his feet up for a couple of days may not have been the worst thing in the world. Yeah. So I think it's a really, if managed correctly, it can be really helpful as you get down to the stretch.
Well, the game itself, the Zags win that 82-67. Wasn't nearly as easy as that score implies. They had kind of a back and forth game, although the Zags led for 36, 37 minutes. They were in front, but it was almost always in that single digit range. They kind of pushed it out to 10 in the first half. Portland came right back. Got it tight, 56-54, when the Zags kind of clicked in those final 7-8 minutes. And pulled away. Really, I thought the Zags' best defensive stretch there in that when they pulled away, and maybe their best offensive stretch, because I thought they executed. They got it to the guys who were having great nights, and that was Julian Strother and Anton Watson, with some help from other guys. And obviously, Drew Timme did his thing, not in the scoring column, but in drawing so much attention that everybody else had a nice night. Let's start with Julian. He had the game of his career. Not often you see a guy break his scoring record, his personal best, by 17 points, but he did. On fire from three, but I thought more impressive was I looked at the shot totals after the game. I was surprised he had 21 shots. It didn't seem like he forced anything, rushed anything, tried to take over. It seemed like it was all within the offense. And maybe the best thing he did when they chased him off that line, he showed the mid-range. He got to the rim a time or two. Got a beautiful floater. He really is effective there. Why was it his night against the Pilots?
Well, I mean, immediately I thought he was aggressive looking to score, but to your point, within the context of what they were trying to do, sometimes as a player, I don't care how good you are, you see one or two go in early and it can make all the difference in the world. And I think Mark may have talked about it after the game, just, as well as much as he had it rolling, it didn't feel like he was trying to force the issue at all. It really came within the context of what they were trying to do offensively. I mean, obviously Portland was going to try to shut off Timmy no matter what.
Yeah.
But I was really impressed with just his approach. But, to your point, I think sometimes Julian in the past anyway can get a little bit 3-point happy. And he certainly had it going from three. But to your point, it just was really well balanced. At 6 of 9 inside the arc, 4 of 4 from the free throw line. He wasn't just feeding off the 3-point shot. And he's a guy when he's playing, to kind of his max ability, he's a guy who can score at all three levels. And when he sets his mind to it, we saw that against Portland. It's not even about the 40 points. I mean, he can be effective getting you 18, 20, but doing it the same way, which is I'm not just relying on a 3-point shot. I can take guys off the bounce. He's really good on those kickouts. He's moving on the catch. So often you see guys, they catch the ball and then they get into their move. He's really good at, as the ball's coming to him, he's already determined, I'm going to attack the defender with the dribble drive. And so on the catch, he's already moving. It's really hard to keep him in front. And we saw that a ton against Portland as they were trying to adjust and really overly aggressively close out to his 3-point shot. And then, you mentioned Anton. It's just, it's getting to the point where I think if you're scouting Gonzaga as we get to the second half of the schedule, if you're going to put all your eggs in the basket of we're going to shut off Timmy, he has a knack for having a big game. Yeah. When Drew gets doubled or triple teamed, Anton consistently hurts the other team with leaving, kind of not giving him any attention either on the offensive glass or his ability to kind of score opportunistically. I thought he was tremendous. We saw the same thing at Pacific as well.
Yeah, you're right. And not only Anton has the big night, usually when Drew's getting, they try to put defense on him, try to put him in a phone booth with guys everywhere around him. But there's almost always one guard that seems to go off too. If you look back, and we'll talk about Santa Clara here in a bit, that was the Nolan Hickman game with 20. Right. Now Drew had a nice night that night, but the game before, San Francisco, he really struggled. San Francisco has some size inside and bothered him, but that was the Regier Bolton night, if you remember. So throughout, when Drew is not getting his customary 20, he has found ways to impact the game. And I thought he did that very well the other night. It had to be a frustrating game for him personally. I mean, guys used to scoring 20, 25. He does that in the half sometimes.
Yeah.
Go ahead if you have
what I really like about Drew's, there's so many things about Drew's approach, but one of the things I like is when he doesn't force it. He only took 7 shots. Now some might say, well, you've got to be more aggressive looking to score. But when you've got 3 guys, 2 guys on you and a third guy kind of hovering around you, I just like the fact that he doesn't force the issue. If it comes, it comes. But he's a good passer now out of those situations, and he finds other ways to impact the game. I'm not sure we would have said that 2 years ago. If his scoring wasn't there, what else is Drew going to do for you? Obviously, his game is just that much more well-rounded now.
Yeah. And I think he is so used to having doubles and the guard sloughing down or the opposite big coming, whatever it is. It's never comfortable, probably. I mean, I didn't draw a lot of double teams myself, Foxy, but I can't be comfortable knowing that you're just going to have a swarm on you every time you touch it. but he deals with it. He keeps his head.
Right.
He looked, I mean, the cross-court pass a couple of times, the one to Strother in the second half. He had 2 assists on Strother threes in the first half. Him and Anton connecting, they just have that intuition with each other almost. He has managed to, even games when he doesn't have double digits, I think he's only had 2 of them this year. His assist totals are impressive for a big guy. He's in the threes, and he's had 5, 6, 7 in a game. The way he handles those doubles, I guess experience helps that a little bit, just being the focal point of the scouting report for so long.
Yeah, no, he's as gifted as we've seen on that side of the floor in a long, long time. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think the Zags, with this reset, this 7-day break in between games, really started in on their defense, tried to shore it up. It's been an issue at times in conference play. I think they were giving up 78 a game coming in, a bunch of 3-pointers, pretty high percentages shooting wise. I think I characterized it as baby steps forward against Portland. Portland's pretty good offensive crew. They got Moses Wood. They got Sholin. That's a really nice big with stretchability. They have the guard line that's good with Tyler Robertson, an all-league guy. They scored 67. They did hit some threes. They did have moments where the Zags got lost a little on their rotations. Thought the Zags were better with dribble penetration this time. I thought they gave up some threes that they probably shouldn't have, but their rotations were a touch better. Like I said, they didn't make the grand step forward, but I think you'll take 67 against Portland. Pretty good outfit offense.
Yeah, I mean, Portland shot, 42% from 3. Half their shots came from the 3-point line, but they turned it over 18 times. Gonzaga had 12 steals. I was thinking about our conversation today and what we talked about last week about Gonzaga's defense while I was watching the game. And it might just be more of a function of bend, don't break. And we have to put together a 6 to 8 minute stretch of game where we clamp things down. Because, you can win a game at the end of the first half or first 10 minutes of the second half, just because if your defense, gets locked in for a consistent stretch, and given the way Gonzaga can score it, now if you're in a 5-point game, you can extend that out to 12 or 14. And even if the team makes a run on you, your defense maybe isn't as tight, after that run, you've built that cushion. And Gonzaga is so good at scoring the ball that, that may be the formula. We're probably, it's unlikely they're going to all of a sudden morph into a team that's going to guard people for 40 minutes at a high level. Yeah. But can we put together that stretch? And I think we saw that against Portland.
Yeah, and what we talked about a week ago, it doesn't have to be holding people to 60, but that number 78's just got to come into the low 70s and the 60s on occasion. With their offense, 9 nights out of 10, that's going to be good enough. And so I think that was a positive stretch. I think they're going to get challenged a lot more this coming week with Santa Clara and St. Mary's. Those are 2 pretty good offenses. Gale's not so much in point totals, but in efficiency. Really good. One more thing with the Portland series, if you go back and the way they've chosen to guard Timmy, I think is a lot of the reason why it's this way. So much attention on Drew that the Zags hit 18 threes last year at the McCarthy, tied the building record for made threes. 17 in the first game in the McCarthy this year, and then I think 11 the other night. Ball's kind of in Portland's court here. Shante Leggins, the old Eastern coach, is in his second year at Portland, to try to find a way that every coach in the league and every non-conference coach the Zags face, try to find that balance of not letting Drew get 30 or not letting the 3-point line destroy you. There's almost an adjustment that has to happen from that end to see what happens with if they meet again, say in the tournament. Is there any other options for the Shante down there?
I mean, the short answer is no. I just think you got to work with kind of what you have. I think the teams that have had the most success are teams that have the ability to change what they're doing over the course of a game, just to keep Gonzaga generally, but Drew specifically, somewhat off balance, not necessarily understanding, not building a rhythm where, okay, after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a half, okay, I know how they're playing me now and I can make an adjustment, but rather, here's the core of our game plan today. But at some point in the game, we're going to change it this way or this other way. And it's not a radical change where you go from, say, doubling him every time. It's about changing where the double comes from, how you're going to double, all those things. And it felt like, at least without, going back and watching the game tape, that Portland was kind of consistent throughout the night with what they were throwing at him. And that's just, you can't do that with Drew. Even though he didn't have a big scoring night, he had an impact in the game. And to your point earlier, I mean, there's been these other guys have stepped up in these moments. It's not been consistent on who it's been, but someone's found a way to have an impact in these games where the teams have been able to shut his scoring down. I think that's going to be part of the challenge going forward for everybody in the league, including St. Mary's, is, okay, we do a good job limiting Drew's effectiveness scoring the ball. We cannot let another guy go off, though. We still have to defend the other guys on this team.
Yeah, that's walking the fine line, because
Right.
it seems to happen when they shut Drew down. I think first and foremost, you just have to have either the size, like USF had the size,
Or LMU.
or LMU, or that crazy athleticism and length, one or the other. And then you maybe don't have to devote as many resources to trying to stop Drew. But so most teams have found out that is not easy to do. This week coming up, got Santa Clara coming into the kennel for the rematch of a game the Zags won down in Santa Clara, I believe 81-76. That was in that stretch where every game was a nail biter, 3 or 4 games in a row. Zags were down 14 in the first half. They were down 1 with 90 seconds left. And as we mentioned, Nolan Hickman had the big night that game. I think he finished with 20, and maybe the coolest individual highlight with a crossover step back 3 that put the Zags ahead, a pretty memorable play of the season so far. Great moment for the sophomore point guard. But that game was tooth and nail all the way. The Zags were down quite a bit. Santa Clara, to me, has one of the best starting 5s in the league. Maybe don't have the bench depth, but a couple of very nice, capable bigs inside with Parker Braun and Bediako. Big kid inside. They've got a great wing. Keyshawn Justice really had a nice night against the Zags. He's a terrific 3-point shooter.
Right.
And those guards, the Illinois transfer, Brandon Podjemski and Carlos Stewart, was kind of a revelation watching him in that first game. Really nice mid-range game, scored it pretty well. This is a team that can give Gonzaga issues, but they're coming off a loss against Pacific at home. Gave up, I believe, over 90 to Pacific. What you called the first game down in Santa Clara, what stuck out to you about how the Broncos played and how Nolan kind of kept his wits and made a improv play on that last one?
Well, what was crazy about that play was, I think that was out of a timeout, and they had drawn up some action, and it completely broke down.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw guys looking at each other, and trying to direct traffic, and he just took it on his own, just basically said, look, I've got to make a play. And it was just, making the shot aside, just the decisiveness from Nolan in that moment, I thought was really important. And obviously, effectively the game winner. That was a great game to call. The atmosphere was tremendous. It was a really physical game, maybe the most physical game that I've called this year. And you saw that in the first half. I want to say Santa Clara was +9 in the first half on the glass. And Drew was still struggling some. There's some residuals after the San Francisco game, but that second half was completely different. Gonzaga ended up being even on the glass. Drew got going as well, had 20.
Yeah.
Julian had a quiet, 18 points. Probably would have been talking about him a little bit more and Nolan not hit that shot. For Santa Clara, I agree with you. Their starting 5 is about as good as you're going to find in the league. They don't have any depth. I mean, they really struggled when they went to their bench. And we were confused a bit calling the game. Just Podjemski played 34 minutes, but that felt like a game where the kid should have played 38-39. And when he was off the floor, they really struggled to score, although Justice got going in the second half. But that's a team that shoots the ball pretty well. They struggled that night, other than Justice, who was 4 of 9, and he had a stretch there in the second half that kept him in it. But everybody else was 1 of 7 from the 3-point line. Bediako had no impact, 4 fouls, just a couple points. I think he might have played 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So, it's they're 2-2 since they played Gonzaga. And Pacific, we saw that game down there for Gonzaga. I mean, they certainly have some talent, but that's a game you should win, given the talent that they have in their starting 5. So, I'd expect it to be physical up here. Sendik's a really good coach. He's been a lot of different places. They're not going to throw the same formula at Gonzaga. You would expect them to change it up a bit. And if they can get going from 3, if they make shots in the kennel, which is obviously easier said than done, I'd expect this to be a game as well.
Yeah, I think one of the best things going for Gonzaga, when you have a week like this, I call them split weeks, where you have 1 at home and 1 on the road.
Right.
And that Saturday game is a big one. I mean, there's no way around it. It's first and second in the league. Gonzaga's moved up to 12th, I believe, in the latest poll, and St. Mary's is up to 18th. A little bit flipped in the net rankings. St. Mary's is 6th, and the Zags, I believe, are 14 in the net. But when you have that huge game looming in the back half, even if it's a 2-game homestand, but this is the split week, the travel in between, I think it's in a way very good for the Zags. Maybe their mindset and their work ethic and attention to detail and game plan, with that first game being 81-76, and they pulled it out in the final 90 seconds. How they did it with a big second half, knowing that this opponent coming in is going to be a little ticked off, because they probably thought this is our shot to take down the Zags down there, and they've got good personnel. That should keep the Zags' mind engaged on game 1 of this 2-game week. Let me ask you, how did you think? What's the formula for Santa Clara to pull it off? I think they've got to get something inside from some big guys. And what's the formula for the Zags to take care of business?
Well, it's Braun, right? It's not Brown. It's Braun. Yeah, Braun was really active. I thought he played really well. They need to get something out of Bediako. They need all 5 of their guys in the starting lineup to play well. Stewart, to your point, I was super impressed with his ability to effectively get to where he wanted to on the floor. I mean, he's shorter, but he's just a strong-bodied kid, good athlete, so he can get a shot up. But he wasn't very efficient, 5 of 17 from the field. The formula is a lot of what you saw with LMU, which is you don't have to pitch a perfect game, but you've got to, pitch a good one. And the thing that they have that you just don't see a lot of in the league is with Podziemski, they've got a guy who can create his own offense. And I thought Gonzaga did a really good job of kind of, crowding him, kind of cutting down his angles when he had the ball. I'll be really interested to see what Santa Clara does on their high pick and roll stuff. I thought Drew and Anton were really effective at bothering him, not allowing him to make a play off of those screens. I'll be interested to see what they do differently in those situations. But they've got to shoot the ball well, and you want to. I've been on the other side of when you're trying to pull that upset off, and it's the teams that I was on that were able to have a chance to pull those off. We always would talk about we've got to get to that last minute timeout within striking distance, right? Especially on the road, thinking that the home team that's favored to win might tighten up, and can we create that tension for them and give ourselves a chance to win? And having seen both, I think LMU is better, but not by much. And this, when you have a guy like Podziemski, you've got a chance to win any game. And I think you make a great point, or you made a great point earlier, Jim, which is everyone this week is going to be talking about the St. Mary's game. And not that you're going to overlook Santa Clara, but it's easy to not get as excited about that game. You beat them once, you figure you're at home, you're going to beat them again. That's going to be a tough game, in my opinion, for GU if they're not dialed in from the very beginning.
Yeah, and how that game goes, I mean, if it's like the first one, Drew's playing 37 minutes and all the starters are playing 30 plus.
Then you get on a plane.
Yeah, then you got to get on a plane, quick turnaround, quick prep. and the energy, the fuel level in the tank won't be as full. If they come out and win by 25 and they can rest some guys a little bit, maybe that
Right.
leads to a better coming into Saturday's game. But let's move on to Saturday. Foxy, we don't have to be one game at a time in our business. We can look ahead.
I love it.
And that is going to be an interesting game Saturday in Moraga. And part of the challenge of playing St. Mary's is playing in that building. Seats, 4,000, 3,500, something like that. Fans are right on you. Fire codes will be broken. There is. I sit up at the very top. There's not many people further away from the floor than I am. It's a good 85 degrees up there. I'm t-shirting it or lightest golf shirt I could find on that night. I've learned. And just the environment in there. They are rabid fans, great student section that's all over the Zags from start to finish. They play in tough places. They do it every year. BYU probably being one of the toughest, but what that environment, just let's deal with that first before we talk about the specifics of the game. That small, intimate, in-your-face environment, and not to mention that team you're lining up against. What a challenge for facing Gonzaga on Saturday.
Yeah, but I got to tell you, it's what you want as a player. There's no fear. You're looking forward to. You can't wait to be in those environments. I mean, and that's one of the reasons you come to Gonzaga. Despite some of the noise about the league and not being necessarily one of the best leagues in the country, that may be true, but every time you go on the road, you're playing in a full house, and it's going to be loud. It's going to be a really special environment. And St. Mary's obviously is probably the most difficult place to play in the league. I think part of that has to do with how good they are, obviously, but also that gym is just so small. And to your point, it feels like they're all on top of you. And I remember calling games there. When we played St. Mary's, they certainly had turned a corner, and they were good, but they were not what they are now. But I remember calling games there. I mean, you're sitting on the floor, and it feels like somebody's just on your back. There's no way nobody can walk past me. If to your point about a fire or any kind of emergency, I mean, they get them in there as tight as possible. So, and look, this is a St. Mary's team. I don't think anybody in the league is afraid of Gonzaga, in that way. But they're probably the only team in the league who legitimately thinks they're better. Mm-hmm. Everybody else thinks they've got a chance to beat Gonzaga. St. Mary's, I would be certain, thinks that they're better. So that it's just going to be a great atmosphere, and it's one of the nice things about being you and I is I can start looking forward to that game today versus having to focus on Thursday.
Well, the Gales they ended up beating BYU at Provo last Saturday. I caught the last half. Basically, we got done writing and found a TV set to watch it. Great ending with Aiden Mahaney, the freshman guard for the Gales, has just been incredible for them all season. He hits kind of a fall away jumper over BYU's center, and that held up as the game winner. He's the young pup in the lineup at point guard, and then they surround him with just a bunch of veteran guys who've been through all the battles and games for seasons there, and very capable guys as well. They got some size inside. They've got wing shooting. Their 3-point shooting has come a long ways the last couple years. They had a little down stretch, especially for them, where they used to be really good from the threes. It's back. But then just playing St. Mary's, they're going to be efficient on offense. They usually work the clock. They're going to control the tempo, the possessions. And that defense, I kind of keep going back to it. It's an elite defense. I keep hearing from folks that they think it's as good as they've ever had down there. And it's kind of one of those two where they just basically try to keep in front of you, especially a guy like Drew, make them shoot over you. And just smart and individually very good with Logan Johnson and Dukas and Bowen, and the size inside with Saxon has done a nice job. Individually and collectively, they always just kind of look like they're connected to each other. How do the Zags, let's do offense first. How does the Zag offense find a way? That team holds everybody, into the low 60s or even the 50s.
Well,
I don't think the Zags want to score in the 50s or 60s, but if they could get to 70, that may even be a good enough for them. But how do they crack that defense?
Well, I mean, St. Mary's is holding teams on average on the year to 57 points a game. The next closest in this league is 11 points higher than BYU at 68. That's amazing, and it certainly has something to do with the pace of play and their style of play. But they've got a couple guys who can get up into you and can make some plays on that end of the floor. But to your point, they're just solid all the time. They don't beat themselves. They're not, they rarely make a mistake in a rotation or a ball screen action, or, they're always well positioned on the floor. It's almost the way I would kind of describe their defensive approach is you're going to have to make contested shots. We're not going to give you anything easy. You're going to have to make shots over a hand. And that's just it's a very basic philosophy, but that works at the college level. Obviously, as you move up through the food chain and into the higher levels of basketball, guys can make those shots. You've got to be more dynamic on that end of the floor. But the college level, I mean, it's pretty simple. We're not going to beat ourselves on that end of the floor. We're not going to make mistakes, and we're going to do our best to keep you in front. And when we do, you're going to have a hand in your face. You got to make contested shots. So I mean, I think for Gonzaga, can you speed up the game? The message has to be, when we get a stop and we've got the defensive rebound, we have to run. And you see Mark all the time, right? Does this waving of his hands and kind of crouches down and starts sliding up the floor trying to get his guys to push it. He's going to do that 2,000 times at St. Mary's. It's just going to be run. You just don't want to let them, because Gonzaga is so good in that aspect of the game anyway. Yeah. But to be able to try to beat them down the floor, not let them set up that defense, is going to be a big part of it. And then if you are playing against their half court, you can't turn it over. You have to trust your stuff. It's just very difficult to go one-on-one against them and score, because it's not just the guy on the ball, but they do a good job of helping, and they're smart. They're going to have, to my point earlier about being able to change things up midstream, they will have the ability to, they'll have their game plan. They're going to have iterations of that they can go to. That's going to be different. Yeah. So you have to trust your offense, get into it, move the ball, and work for those shots. If you take quick shots against the Gales, it just plays right into them.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, it's a broken record, but I think Drew is going to have some one-on-one opportunities, maybe more, because they believe Saxon and the kid they bring off the bench, another big kid that they probably can match up a little bit one-on-one there. So I think it could be a night where he does some things. He has hurt the Gales in the past a few times, but the Gales, found the formula and turned it around, I think, last year in the game and got the win. So I think it's going to be on Drew and just patience and trying to get a good shot each time down. I don't think it's probably going to be one of those where one of the guards scores 27, like, we saw.
No.
It's just not going to be that kind of game. It's going to be one of those where it's just going to be a matter of mental toughness, getting a good shot down each time, making sure you're challenging, contesting their offense each time down. I think both teams have the same goal in mind, and the Gales aren't going to let you run as much as they'd like to, or they're going to try to limit it, I should say. They're smart enough to know to get back, and they're probably not going to flood the offensive boards, knowing that if they miss, the Zags are going to be trying to make it a track meet. So I think they're going to both have to show half-court execution. How do you see the Zags defense against the Gales offense? You've got Logan Johnson's pretty good penetrator. You got the three-point shooters and a pretty good post presence in Saxon. Balanced. They're not going to throw 85 on you probably, but the shooting percentage is maybe going to be the bigger number than the final point total.
Well, look, you got to be patient on both sides of the ball with St. Mary's. The Gales will put you in all kinds of action. They're not going to be uncomfortable shooting it deep into the clock. And I think what has hurt Gonzaga at points this year is they'll start possessions out well defensively, and then somebody makes a mistake or there's a breakdown somewhere. St. Mary's will kill you if you make those mistakes. So it's just about, I mean, you're going to have to play on that end of the floor for deep into possessions, stay true to what it is you're trying to do, and don't make those mistakes. Take a page from St. Mary's, just be solid, make sure you're doing your job defensively. Don't try to make the home run play, flying into a gap, trying to get a steal or jumping up, trying to get a block around the rim. Just be solid. That'd be the first thing. You've got to take care of the defensive glass. This isn't a great rebounding team, oddly. I mean, St. Mary's, they lead the league in their rebounding margin, but they don't. They don't. It's really because they dominate their defensive glass. It's not so much of what they do on the offensive glass. To your point. So just one shot and out. How many of those possessions can you put together if you're GU? You have to find a way to finish those defensive possessions down consistently. So, and to your point about Drew, I'll be interested to. I mean, he has hurt St. Mary's in the past, and I wouldn't be surprised either if they look to start the game anyway and let Saxton try to see what he can do with them one-on-one. But St. Mary's isn't very deep. They've kind of got the same problem Santa Clara does, where their starting five is legit, and they might have a little bit more quality off of their bench than St. Mary or Santa Clara, but they really only play 7. And St. Mary's can't afford to have Saxton get into foul trouble. So if I'm Drew and I've got one-on-one coverage, A, that's great. And B, I think the faster he goes on his catches, the harder he's going to be to guard, and the more likely it is that he gets their big guys in foul trouble. Imposing himself in that way is going to force St. Mary's to get a little bit deeper into that defensive game plan to try to adjust. I'll be interested that, call it the first 8 minutes. What's the foul trouble situation look like for St. Mary's up front?
Yeah. Well, that's going to be interesting. Can't wait for that one. Can't wait for Thursday. I think that's going to be a good ball game in the kennel as well. That's going to do it for us. Thanks, Richard. Thank you, Christy, for producing and directing us and dealing with us today. Remember, you can catch us every Monday on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google, and then easiest thing for me is just going to the Spokesman-Review website, spokesman.com. Click on the Zags page, and you can find us there. So, hey, thanks for listening. Have a good week. Catch us next Monday. Week.